morning, everybody. This is Michelle Hughes from Ageless and Timeless. Today, I have a guest that has been a previous guest on our podcast. We often do this after a couple of years because there's so much that happens with these technologically based companies, and we also want be sure that our newer viewers get to experience the amazing guests that we have who want to share so much information for us. So today our guest is James White, and he is the founder and CEO of KBMO Diagnostics, which stands, well, actually he'll tell us, but it's kind of fun because it's a family feeling business, even though it's a major business in the industry of testing for the microbiome, the health of the microbiome. But his company name came from the names of his wife, Catherine, his son, Ben, his other son, Max, and his daughter, Olivier, I guess it is. And
Olivia, yeah.
Is that correct, James?
Yeah, absolutely.
Have a good memory, huh? From
that was good.
Yeah, so it's kind of cute because it shows who his real bosses are, and
exactly.
not just the consumers, but the bosses at home. So, James, welcome, and so happy you could come back, and we're happy this time that we can do it in video. So last time we had a technical difficulty, so we had audio only. Why don't you start off, just before the people who haven't heard you before, tell us what KBMO does and why you're unique, and how you differentiate yourself from your competition.
Sure, that'll keep me going for a little while, but I'll start. I'll try and kind of keep it simple for everyone. So the idea about KBMO, we were set up just over 14 years ago now, and the idea was to look at how we can look at food sensitivities and work out on an individualized basis how can we improve patient care. So there's a lot of one size fits all, and we all know that that's pretty poor, a poor model. So what we wanted to do is come up with a way of identifying which foods cause patients an inflammatory response on an individualized basis. And so the reason we wanted to do that is, and I'm sure Michelle's had lots of guests on before talking about root cause analysis. So what we're trying to do is get to the root cause, i.e., via your diet, which foods lead to an inflammatory response. And so that's what we're about, is to try to work out how we can give the patient and provider a way of identifying which foods that the patient's consuming are leading to an inflammatory response unbeknownst to that patient. So again, there's nothing that the patient's doing wrong, but what we want to do is give them the knowledge and the power to say, okay, if I continue to consume this food, it's going to lead to an inflammatory response. And basically, inflammation is the root cause of pretty much every disease state. So what we want to try and work out is, based on something that we all do at least 3 times a day, is work out what are we consuming to make sure that it's not leading to an inflammatory response by doing this great test, which identifies on an individualized basis which foods cause you, the patient, an inflammatory response. And so that inflammation is shown up, as I mentioned, in a myriad of symptoms. So the classical thing with food has always been gut related, but now we're seeing, as we kind of work all these things out, the links between leaky gut and leaky brain, or as a number of our colleagues who are neurologists now tell us, it's leaky brain leading to leaky gut. So what we're trying to work out for you is which foods that we're all consuming are causing that inflammatory response. And so that's really what we are about. And how we differentiate ourselves is we look at this by multiple pathways. So rather than just assuming what we're exposed to is causing the foods, is causing the inflammation, we're looking at, best described by one of our practitioners in Ohio, who said, look, James, this test is different. It's patented, which is great, and you're the only food sensitivity test on the market which is patented, but also you look at the whole immune system. And without getting too scientific on that, what it means is, rather than just looking at what you're exposed to, which is half of your immune system, measures your exposure, Where we really differentiate ourselves is we also look at what it's called the innate immune system, i.e., which of those foods that you're exposed to also goes on to then lead to an inflammatory response. And that's the big difference between KBMO and all the other myriad companies out in the market, is they're telling you what you're exposed to, which I'd argue is a bit of a so what, because we all know what we're eating. What we want to tell you is, more importantly, of what you're eating, which ones are actually causing inflammation. And the great thing about that secondary screen, it helps, in technical jargon, eliminate false positives. But to you and I, what it really means is we zero in on, say, 5 to 10 foods which we're asking patients to eliminate from their diet. And the great thing about that elimination is generally it's only 3 to 6 months. So it's not forever. But the idea is, let's identify a handful of foods which, by looking at this patented process, really zeroes in on the foods which cause you inflammation, which then correlate really strongly with whatever those symptoms are that you present with when you go in to see your provider. And we're fortunate, we have just over 10,000 providers running the test now. And so again, we're widely available all around the US and globally to kind of now access the test, so we can kind of get patients to do it. The other cool thing about what we do, it's a finger stick. So you can do it in the comfort of your own home. Mm-hmm. And so again, you can get it through providers, and they'll enable you either to do it in their offices, or more importantly, you can do it at home as well. So again, we've tried to make it widely accessible, but again, we value the review that you can then have with your provider to make sure we understand what's going on from a dietary standpoint, along with what else is you're going. So we would describe our providers being the 1% of providers who really care about what you're consuming, to make sure they bear that in mind on an individualized basis when they treat you, the patient.
And so how do you differentiate yourself from, let's say, some of the other tests like the SpectraCell or the doctor's data, or, you know,
like I say, all those guys, great companies, they're generally measuring a pathway which is called IgG. And that is that half of your immune system that we talked about. So we don't stop at that point, because that what is broadly, again, if you talk to any allergist, they'll say, like, we don't believe in IgG testing. And the reason they don't believe in it is because, again, those you've just mentioned, some fantastic companies, you know, best in class, I would argue, all the way through there. But the limitation isn't those companies, it's that pathway, because that pathway is only telling you what you're exposed to. What we believe is way more important is, rather than stopping at that point, we believe that's where the magic happens with KBMO, is because you're now going on to look at, of that long list of foods you're exposed to, which ones are truly causing an inflammatory response, back to what we spoke about earlier, i.e. the root cause of what symptoms you're presenting with. And so obviously there's other things that will impact why you're sick, but clearly your diet is an important element to that. And what we always hear from the best providers that we work with, and we're fortunate we work with many of them, is that view your body as an engine. When you buy a new car, they'll tell you which gas to put in it, or now I guess which electricity to put in it. But the idea is, what they're trying to work out is, for a car, the specific oils and things that you should use to optimize that engine's performance. Your body is no different. What we're trying to help you with, via the help of some of these great providers, is which are the foods which you need to eliminate to make sure that your body can be in an optimum state, so that, again, you can fully function, as your program suggests, to have significant longevity. And the great thing about your diet, it's something we can all impact. It's not based on, on the pharmaceuticals or drugs or anything like that. It's all based on what you're actually putting into that engine or your body. And so you have 100% control of that.
So you are laser focused on food, which we all know food is our medicine. However, there are other environmental and well, I guess environmental would be the easiest one, the EMFs and the toxins and the pesticides and all the other. How do you, how do you put it all together in a formula that obviously affects inflammation and affects illness, but with food being your baseline, and KBMO being the source to determining what those foods are? But how do you factor in these other influencers on our total wellness. Today's podcast is brought to you by Water and Wellness. Water and Wellness is one of the best companies to find purified water. They have a countertop system that I use, and I travel with it all the time. So I would highly recommend you look at that. If you use the Ageless code, you'll get a 10% discount. waterandwellness.com/pages/ageless and timeless. That's how you can order to get the discount. So visit waterandwellness.com or call 877-296-6880 to learn how to take control of your drinking water and learn about all those natural additives to optimize your health and longevity.
So we also look at, equally importantly as your foods, are colorings and additives. Because again, to your point, you mentioned some of those things already, Michelle. But the key with all those colorings and additives, I argue we live in a kind of 3D world. You're seeing them in three main areas. You're seeing them in processed foods. You're increasingly seeing them in supplementation. And thirdly, you're seeing them in personal hygiene products. So we're looking at those colorings and additives to make sure that patients are aware of what might be going on from a coloring and additives perspective. And so we measure those on the test as well. And so what I found really interesting is that you see those appear. And so again, those three areas are things that we can't really ignore in our lives. We're all eating processed foods, unfortunately, given what goes into them now. And there's all sorts of things like these colorings. A classic example of that is the red dye in, I'm sure, most people's favorite red velvet cake, was invented by Bayer Pharmaceuticals after World War II to color plastics. So again, here we are 60 years on. I'm not sure we've made much progress on the fact that what we're looking at now is those colorings, which instead of being, I'm sure they are being applied to plastics, but they're also in the food chain. And so there's all these colorings and additives that have appeared in the food chain that we're trying to eliminate, or should be eliminating, given the toxicity that they're creating. And as you quite rightly mentioned, there's other environmental issues as well. But our view is, by covering the key foods that people are consuming and looking at those colorings and additives, you look at some of the key barriers for patients in terms of the skin, the gut, and what they're consuming. And so that's really important in terms of what we're doing as an organization, is to try and cover off as many elements with a single test. And so in a way, that leads us neatly into the kind of third element that we look at is kind of gut health as well. Because when you look at what people are causing their inflammatory responses, there's always been a kind of classical question. It's a kind of chicken and egg. Which came first? Was it leaky gut or food sensitivities? And again, I would argue the differentiator between our physicians and some of the others out there is they believe in both of those terms. And so they understand that, it's tough to look at one without the other. And so what we've done is, rather than, being closed to that, is we've now developed a panel that sits alongside the food sensitivity test to look at your immune health via your gut health. And again, you talked about food being our medicine. And again, Hippocrates talked about, all disease begins in the gut. So again, what we wanted to do was align those two elements together to make sure that that's how, to say differentiate would be unfair, completely puts us in a different class, I'd argue, from any other food sensitivity test on the market. Because what we're now doing is we're giving the provider a way of working out what's going on from a gut health, so an immune health perspective, and what's going on from an inflammatory perspective with our food sensitivity test. So again, in terms of what sets us apart, that combination puts us, I would say, worlds apart from everyone else. Because again, it's that dynamic combination of the two, which is where a lot of the good practitioners work, and we're very fortunate that we work with a lot of those.
Well, so you said two things. One is, you said your test is the only one that's patented. What kind of patent do you have?
So it's around those multiple pathways. So as I say, the reality is, rather than just having a patent which looks at one pathway, it's that combination of pathways, which is really, as I mentioned, where the magic begins, because it gives us a way of, rather than just isolating a pathway, the reality of everything in life is more complex than just a single answer. If it wasn't, then probably none of us would have a business, and more importantly, we'd all be able to take care of our own health. In essence, it's that combination of elements that work together, and that's why we look at those multiple pathways with the food sensitivities, and also why we look at the combination of immune health with the gut barrier panel, as well as inflammation with our food sensitivity test, and layered on, as we just discussed, the environmental elements by looking at those colorings and additives to really try and get to the crux of what might be going on, and as importantly, what might be causing those symptoms that the patients present with.
You also said that, no, that's very helpful, James. You also said that your test is so simple. It's a blood test. I mean, and you can do it in your home, which is very different than the typical microbiome testing, which is usually stool testing. And yes, you can do it in your home, but it's not much fun.
Exactly.
So what is it that makes your blood test as or more efficacious than the typical stool test?
Sure. So we do, I'll talk a little bit about the gut barrier panel. So there's 4 key markers on there, and there's a couple of pathways that we measure. And so the 4 markers are Candida, zonulin, occludin, and LPS. And I'll go into a little bit of detail on each one of them without kind of trying to hopefully.
I'm glad you mentioned it, because I want you to define each one for.
Exactly. I will.
Show a picture of the test if you have one handy.
Yeah.
That show the.
Let me see if I can bring that up as well, so we can show everyone what the what we're talking about when we talk about those markers. So
test, like I did in at the A4M a couple of years ago. What does it look like, and what are those terms?
I just need you to let me screen share.
That's fine. That's fine.
Can you and I'll bring that panel up, and to your point, hopefully that'll make it a bit clearer to people in terms of what we're talking about.
Go back to the stool test, because I think people really want to know, how can I avoid that?
I know.
It's so easy. It's just pricking my finger and getting a.
Thanks to say. I don't know if Jamie, our editor-in-chief, can help us get into that, but it says host disabled participant screen sharing. So maybe there's a button at the bottom of your screen there.
Okay, Jamie, if you can. He says, can you see what he's saying? Can you email a picture?
Yeah, let me see if I can find it. I'm not sure I've got a picture of it here. Here you go. We'll go live. I will take a picture of it now, and then we'll send it. So that'll be. I think that's described as multimedia, isn't it? So we'll get that so everyone. And I think it's definitely worth showing, because again, I think it will show people exactly what we're talking about, which I think is helpful.
Exactly.
Let me just send that to Jamie, so he's got that. So what was that email again, Jamie? Here we go. Let's bring that up. To T Suite. Here we go. I won't repeat it, but here we go. And we'll get this out to you. But I think it's really helpful to show people, the different pathways that we're looking at, but more importantly, I think the 4 different elements that we've included, which I think will be really, make it a lot more sense than we've got now. So here we go.
Most people, most people know, you say Candida, we Americans, I think, say Candida, but anyway, whichever way, Candida or Candida, most people know what that is. I don't think a lot of people know what zonulin, occludin, and LPS are. And so those markers are really important to understanding the results of your test. So that's why I wanted people to have a visual, if it can work. If not, we'll just talk about it. But
no problem. I think that's a great idea. So hopefully Jamie will have that, and he'll bring that up on screen. But to your point, the other nice thing about what we're doing there is we're looking at a couple of pathways. So we're looking at the IgG and the complement, which obviously we do with our foods, which we were just discussing earlier. But we've also added a thing called IgA1 and 2, because IgA is a secretory marker, which generally indicates it's found localized in the gut. So we want to look at those 4 markers from, is it in the gut, or has it become more systemic? And if it's become more systemic, generally what you'll see is the IgG and the C3d elevated. So again, that's why we want to look at those multiple pathways to see, is it early stage? So that helps the provider work out what they need to do. If it's early stage, or is it later stage, i.e. more systemic, and been going around for a longer time period. So hopefully, I haven't seen Jamie respond to see whether he's got that.
Not yet, but
it's got to go all the way from Boston to California on the super highway. So hopefully there's no accidents on the super highway today. Let me see if he's got it.
Jamie, are you okay about getting a visual up for us? Just waiting for the email. Oh, so the email hasn't gone through. Wow.
Anyway, so you've got, as I said, we've got these two pathways, and we'll talk about those four markers. So we use Candida as a indicative of there may well be some early stage dysbiosis going on, so things beginning to occur that we'd want to avoid. And then to your point, Michelle, we talk about those two markers, zonulin and occludin, and they're talking about those tight junctions that exist between your gut and your blood system. So you want to make sure that they're opening and closing appropriately. And so zonulin is a great indicator of how well those are functioning. And so we were very fortunate to work with what I describe as the dream team of Dr. Alessio Fasano, who discovered zonulin and its links with celiac disease, and then also our very own Dr. Brent Dorval, who invented the KBMO fit test. And his not insignificant claim to fame was he invented the first rapid HIV test as well. So again, a brilliant man. Both of those are brilliant scientists. And again, what we wanted to use is their combined know-how to develop this zonulin test, and that's what they did for us. And so it's a unique recombinant zonulin antibody that we've developed, which enables us to measure that zonulin, which tells you how well those tight junctions are functioning. And then we also developed with our team was the occludin marker, which tells you structurally they're still together or they're beginning to come apart. So it's almost level 1 Candida, level 2 zonulin, level 3 occludin. And so the neat thing about that zonulin marker, not wanting to keep circling back to stool, but again, important to kind of highlight that zonulin was developed or discovered by Dr. Alessio Fasano. And when I asked him, should that be a stool or a blood test, he told me, he said, James, all my seminal research was done on the zonulin in blood. So on the basis it was good enough for him and his papers that have been published in the Lancet and other major journals, we wanted to kind of mirror his work, and that's really what we see now in terms of the prevalence in terms of the patient population that we measure is very similar to the data he had published in the Lancet back in early 2000. So we feel very good about the quality of that marker. And again, that's a unique marker to KBMO. So we have the only patented food sensitivity test, and we have this unique zonulin that is not available to anyone else in the marketplace. And again, because it's so good, that avoids people having to do the stool test, or at least understanding by doing this panel that we talk about, do they have to go and do the stool test or not? Because if a lot of the markers are elevated, then you may feel like that you could be reflexed onto a stool test at that point.
And what about LPS?
I was just coming to that now. So LPS is short for a thing called lipopolysaccharides, which again is one of these markers that we talked about: leaky gut, leaky brain. Lots of links between brain health and gut health linked with lipopolysaccharides. It's also another indicator of the innate immune system. And so we mentioned the innate immune system with the C3d marker. That's the second pathway that we measure. And so again, we're strongly identifying on that side of the fence as well. So not just exposure. And it's been nicknamed by a good friend of ours, the company's Dr. Rob Silverman, as El Diablo. So basically, if you've got elevated LPS, that's indicative that a number of the gram-negative bacteria that may be present in your gut are inflaming you and causing you issues. So again, if that's elevated, that's great information to know, and may then lead on to going to do a stool test if required. But again, if all those markers are negative, you don't necessarily, I would say that probably gives you a pretty good way of avoiding having to do the stool test. If they're positive, then you might want to consider it based on the provider you work with. And what our providers say, so on the bottom of our report, we say, if any of these 8 markers are positive, then we recommend you consult your provider with regards a good gut healing protocol. And so that's the advantage of doing this test, is we can identify what might be going on from a tight junction perspective, i.e., do you have leaky gut or not? Is there any early indication of dysbiosis? Can we get to it ahead of time with the Candida marker? Or has it got more severe and the LPS is elevated, i.e. that lipopolysaccharides is kind of kicking off as well. And lipopolysaccharides is linked to many different things. We talked about brain, cardiovascular health as well. So again, another one of those important markers. Zonulin's also linked with cardiovascular health. So again, you want to make sure that we're measuring these markers. And for the physicians that we work with, not a huge surprise that they recognize the interactions between all these different things. So you don't just go and see a gastroenterologist. That's the beauty of these functional medicine type providers that we work with. They're looking at the patient in the whole versus just identifying individual elements. So I think that's the great thing with functional medicine and the providers that we work with. They're some of the best of the best, but more importantly, they're looking at you as a whole versus individual organ by organ, given that's not how your body works. The reality is your body is interconnected. All these things are working together. So the idea is great to work with providers who understand that versus are limited to maybe just one area of your body, given the interactions and the fact that all these markers are linked through the research with having an impact in a number of different concepts and areas as well.
What I think has happened over the last few years is the microbiome has taken a front seat to so many of the discussions about your overall health, and this, of course, is really good for you in that you're providing solutions to people who are facing the deterioration or the damage of their microbiome, and it seems like almost like there isn't a person alive that does not have a microbiome issue one way or the other, whether it's leaky gut or candida or we could go into all the reasons why. I think everybody knows it's a society has gone awry with respect to choices, and there's just too many bad choices and too many people that are susceptible to, whether they don't have the proper information or they just don't care, but they make the choices that are damaging to them. If somebody wants to back up a little bit first and find out if they are inflamed just by looking at their blood, is the C-reactive protein test the test that you recommend? I know that's used for cardiovascular health, but it's also used.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, that's a great one. And actually, we also we're just developing a cardiovascular inflammation test, and high C-reactive protein is one of the markers we've included because, again, talking about those interactions, we did a clinical study looking at IBS patients in the greater LA area, Los Angeles area, about 10 years ago now. And we measured high sensitive CRP as well as triglycerides and homocysteine levels. And what we saw, we took 100 patients, it was an IRB approved study, and we saw in the intervention group a dramatic reduction in symptoms when they eliminated the foods that we'd identified on the food inflammation test. But also we saw their CRP, so their high sensitive CRP, a general, as you point out, cardiovascular inflammatory marker, came down precipitously, as well as homocysteine levels as well. So again, that really talks to those interrelationships that I was kind of mentioning earlier. If you've got leaky gut or you've got IBS, you're also dealing with high levels of CRP, so C-reactive protein, as well as elevated homocysteine levels. If you can help heal that gut, then good things happen across the system. So it's not isolated to just one thing. And so again, back to Hippocrates from obviously quite a while ago now, saying that all that disease starts in the gut. So if you can heal that gut, then you're in a really strong position to look at your overall health. And I think the great thing about this test, it's identifying a handful of foods, so it's not overwhelming. And the other nice thing, sometimes you see these reports of 20, 30 pages. Again, you've got to maybe be a PhD and maybe even higher to kind of understand some of these things. So the idea about how we present the information back to patients and providers is it's simple. We want it to be approachable because at the end of the day, if a patient cannot understand the report and what it's telling you, then we've lost. Because what we want to do is we want our patients to be compliant. Because again, if they're not compliant, then we're all kind of wasting our time, frankly. So the idea here is, how do we, with good science, make sure we present data in a format that is approachable and understandable for patients. And so a good example of that is our report is intentionally short. It's not because we ran out of things to say after 3 pages. The idea is let's keep it short so you, the patient, can see the foods you need to eliminate, and it's easy for the provider to interpret as well. And the gut barrier panel is on that 3-page report as well. So that's really key to us to make sure it's simple and easy to understand. And we've also now added a food app, sorry, an app, so you can get those results on your phone. Because again, 20 years ago, you'd be able to kind of come back from seeing your physician. You could stick your results on a magnetic fridge and you'd be in great shape. Unfortunately, those fridges aren't very magnetic anymore. And nowadays, everyone's got a smartphone. So let's put that information on their phone. So if you're grocery shopping, you've got access to it. If you're out for dinner with friends, you've got access to it. And you can show them, or if you're in a restaurant, you can show the waiter, look, these are the foods I need to eliminate or not eat when I'm here. Can you help me with my choices of what I'm going to consume tonight? Other neat thing we've done is we've provided a meal plan, because again, we want to make sure that whatever journey a patient is on, that they've got the information, the tools that can help them be successful. Because as I say, that's the key for what we do. We want patients to be successful. So let's give them some tools versus going, here's your report, good luck with that. Our approach is how do we give you, the patient, and the providers tools to kind of enhance the likelihood of a patient being successful with whatever that outcome they're looking for on their overall health journey.
What would you call a normal homocysteine level?
That's a great question. I'll get back to you on that in terms of what we'd consider normal on that. Again, that can vary. So again, we can confirm that. But definitely what we saw on the study that we ran was a great reduction in that homocysteine and the CRP level. So it was really exciting, because that we talk about having a food inflammation test. And again, HCRP, as you mentioned, Michelle, is one that all physicians from any walk of life would understand as a true marker of inflammatory response. So the fact that we saw that decline, I think, is really interesting. And the fact it was an IBS population, not maybe a more classical cardiovascular population, I think, as I say, speaks to that interaction between the various markers and the various systems in your body.
Right. And then what is the ELISA test? I know that's kind of the grandfather, right, of the food allergy.
Well, ELISA is a type of technology which has been broadly adapted across many countries now. And so one of the reasons we've applied it, because again, we have labs now in Mexico, Brazil, one in Shanghai, one in a place called Chengdu, and obviously our own here in Boston, Massachusetts. And so again, it's a relatively straightforward, highly robust technology that you can implement in many different parts of the world. So our view is, let's not necessarily have a $500,000 piece of kit for labs to try and set up themselves. Let's make sure we have a technology that is highly robust, that can then be and affordable, to make sure that we can share the love, as it were, all around the world of the tests and technologies that we do, rather than make them prohibitively expensive for people to get involved in it. And that's both at the provider as well as patient level. So we've intentionally tried to make sure we keep things affordable. And that's one of the great examples of that. Let's use the most robust technology out there, which is ELISA. And the other nice thing with KBMO is we not only have the test, but we manufacture those ELISA tests as well. So we control the entire value chain. So that's really important, because again, we're looking at up to 176 different foods, colorings, and additives, and the 8 markers that we just described on that gut barrier panel. We are passionate about making sure those results are accurate. And the best way you can ensure of those things is controlling all those things yourself. And so that's one of the things we've done as an organization, is rather than leave those things to chance, let's make sure we control all that to enhance the performance of the testing. A great example of that, again, is one of the reasons I think we're so accurate is because our founder, with his infectious disease, i.e. measuring HIV back in the day, we use 15 standards and controls per patient to enhance, to make sure it's not only very reproducible, but also it's highly accurate. And again, I think that's been one of the knocks on some of these tests historically, is that they've not always been accurate. So again, that's the great thing about what we do. All our manufacturing is under FDA, is in an FDA registered manufacturing facility, and all the tests are run in a clear, high complexity lab. So again, all these things are monitored, which we love because again, that enhances and ensures the accuracy of the testing that we perform.
The other thing too is that being vertically integrated, you don't rely on the Chinese or the supply chain that's been so damaged in the last few years, and so
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
so that affects not only the efficacy, the quality, but also the price,
Yeah.
and the time that you have to respond to the patient because of the fact that you're controlling all of the different processes that go along into the measurement. So I think that's a really big uniqueness about you.
The
That
only thing we buy from externally is from a big US manufacturer. During COVID, they were having issues. We drove to the plant in Maine to pick up the product. So
well,
again, we are not shy to get off our behinds and kind of fix problems. So
right,
again, we are making sure that that was the only thing that we didn't have. Now we stock well over 12 months supply of that one product. That was the only thing we weren't consuming or manufacturing rather.
you're still a private company, correct?
We are. We
I
are.
bet you've been approached by a lot of the big guys.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, but the beauty of being private is we can invest heavily in R&D as we're doing, and looking after our people, which again is an old-fashioned approach, but we think it's really important that, we look after the people that work for us. They do an amazing job. We're very, and I always say it's a great position of fortune that we're in, that we can employ people. So if people choose to work for us, we want to make sure we do the best that we possibly can for them. I'd argue that's not something, if you work for a financially backed organization, that they would say the same thing. So again, the fact that we're family run and owned is very, very important to me, because again, it means we can be Johnny on the spot. We can do whatever we need to support our providers in terms of getting them test results or whatever other questions they may have. And that is, we're very passionate about that. We don't look at, well, is that going to be cost effective to pick up the phone and speak to Michelle on a Sunday? We don't care about that, because we're privately owned and we're going to make sure we do the very best for all our clients. We're not led by shareholders. We're led by making sure we're passionate about doing the right job for all our clients and all our suppliers, and more importantly, all our employees as well.
Well, I am a little remiss in not doing what I normally do at the beginning of every podcast, probably because you were on my podcast previously, and that is asking you about your journey to where you are today. So let me just give a quick thumbnail so I don't interrupt our flow here, because we're really into the weeds of the product. But the reason I'm interrupting right now is because James, well, first, everybody can tell I think everybody can tell where you come from, and that, of course, is our wonderful ally across the pond, Great Britain. And although we were having a conversation at RADFest this weekend, I was there for the health convention, and one of the topics was, because there were some British people there, is how do you tell the difference between Great Britain, South Africa, Australia, and what was the other one? There's one
Probably
more.
New Zealand.
New Zealand, of course.
Yeah.
And so, people were saying that it's real. And then I asked them, can they tell? The one guy was from near London. I said, can you tell the different dialects when you come to the US? So anyway, so it is kind of difficult for us. For me, I oftentimes confuse someone from Australia, although they are far more nasal than the Great Britain, but South Africa, I do have some difficulty differentiating. But anyway, not to get into that subject, it's kind of humorous. But you obviously have been here for many, many years, and came here having been with big corporations, and came here with a big corporation, and then, as often happens with entrepreneurs who have their training with the big companies and then morph into the entrepreneurial world. But in between there, you were with venture capital companies, and so the fact that you didn't turn to venture capital for KBMO, I think, is a much more compelling point here, given that you had all the contacts and could have gone that way. But of course, when you're going that way with the investor philosophy of the venture capital world, you do potentially you lose a lot of control. And
Definitely. And I think the other point is they all have funds, and they have to kind of, they're master to, other financial institutions. And so
correct.
that timing may not necessarily work with what makes sense for us as an organization. And so my view, having seen that happen, much better to take control of your own destiny and do it the right way. And that gives us an ability to have a much longer term view and enable us to be vertically integrated, because we're going to look, we own this business already for over 10 years, which would be heresy in the venture capital world.
Right.
Whereas we're just starting after 10 years. I always joke, we're an overnight success after 10 years. So it's one of those things where, if you can take a long-term view, generally the outcomes will be much more beneficial versus kind of, constantly being in a flip mode, which I think a lot of these financial places are. They try and quickly bolt things together so they can get to whatever scale really means, so they can flog the thing on. Our view is build it the right way organically and make sure as we add stuff, it'll be as we are, world class. And so again, they don't have that luxury because they're always in a hurry, rush to nowhere. Our view is make sure you take your time, you do it right, and if you do that, then you'll have long-term success. And we're very fortunate that's where we're at.
Well, that actually brings up a very good point, and I'm getting a little bit off the track, but it's important that we cover this. Where are you going? Where do you think? What is your exit strategy? Where do you think you will be in the next 10 years?
So I think our view is, as I mentioned, we've got the best food sensitivity test in the world, and that's a great place to be. But we've also got over 10,000 providers. So our view is, can we add more world-class tests? World-class being the emphasis versus just we're going to add stuff. And I think that's our focus, is to say, how do we add the best of the best? So a good example of that would be zonulin. There were zonulin tests on the market that were average. And so we didn't want to settle for average. We wanted to develop one ourselves. So it took us 4 years. If I was in a public company, I'd probably been fired for that. But in the kind of, I think, the much better private world that I operate in, we took our time and created the best of the best. And so sometimes, a Gantt chart isn't always right. And so you want to make sure you've got the longevity to make sure you come up with the right products. And that's what we've done. And so, we've got the best gut barrier panel. In fact, the only gut barrier panel in the world with a unique zonulin test. So again, that's another way of separating us from the competition. And again, I think what we've done with our cardiovascular information test, same thing. It's another world-class test that we've added, and we're now looking at adding more tests, and we'll watch this space to continually making sure that we keep supporting our clients in the best way we can, and our patients, and our employees, and our suppliers. So I think our view is, if you look after those stakeholders who we consider very important, then good things happen. And so we're very fortunate. We have a lot of great physicians who work with us and providers, and so we're constantly working with them to find out what are the next things that they would like to add. And so certainly that's how we created the gut barrier panel, was feedback from those individuals. When we went from our Fit 132, which is 132 foods, colorings, and additives, to our Fit 176, we worked with just over 300 providers there to kind of find out from them what it was that they want, versus saying, well, we're brilliant scientists, we'll tell you what you want. That's not our approach. We're very fortunate we have some great clients, and so we want to listen to them to understand what they want, and then do it in the right way, which isn't necessarily a quarterly financial model. It may take longer, and we're happy with that, because what we want to do is come up with the best of the best, not a cheap, fast one, because I've got to, shut my venture capital fund in 3 years or 3 months, whatever it is. So our view is, we want to do the best by our clients, best by our employees, best by the patient, and best by our suppliers.
And you mentioned the food allergens, but you didn't mention the cosmetics, which I think is another point on the three-legged stool of food and additives and then personal hygiene.
For sure, yeah. So those colorings and additives, you see them in terms of, we've seen number of those markers in terms of that come up in those, to your point, those cosmetics. And so again, thinking of skin as another barrier, if anything's going on, we see amazing results where patients have different psoriasis, other skin related issues. The reality with a lot of those, it's your body's natural response of an inflammatory response, and that's why you see those things. And so again, if you can look at someone's diet to work out what might be causing that, then that's where I think you get these really incredible results that we see and hear on a constant basis from our providers that patients feel great because we've identified some of these issues. Things like migraines, another one. That's another inflammatory response. We see great outcomes with patients who have migraines. So again, think of all these things which are leading from inflammation. Think of bone inflammation or inflammation, arthritis. All these things are linked to inflammation. We're in the process of doing an autism study at the moment with Purdue University. So we're very fortunate we're at the stage where, again, we're not looking to flip this business. We're looking to expand it and look at ways of we can work with more people, doing more, clinical research to expand our capabilities and the types of providers we work with. With the brain health stuff, we're seeing, again, we've been approached by a number of neurologists now who see the links between leaky gut and leaky brain. And so that's another whole area that, again, we're very dominant in because, again, we have that gut barrier panel that they'd probably like us to, rename brain barrier panel, but that's fine. So, those tight junctions, guess what? They're not just in the gut. They're in the brain and they're in other major organs. So I think, we feel very fortunate that we've invested and taken the time to develop the best of the best tests, which then have application in a number of these areas. And I think that's the great thing with our company is we've got these opportunities and just making sure we do them steadily and slowly and make sure we do it the right way on the basis of longevity and doing it the right way versus looking for a kind of an exit as such.
And do you screen the providers? That 10,000 of them, that's a lot of providers, and you're going to only grow from here. So how do you know that you're getting the best of the best when you when a provider approaches you?
Well, we're very fortunate now. A lot of them are coming to us in terms of they're being referred by their colleagues, and so that's always a very nice thing for us in terms of we're at that stage of rather than pushing the kind of snowball up the hill, it feels like it's coming down the other side where we get those referrals, and there's frankly there's no better indication of the job you're doing when one of your clients is referring you on to one of their colleagues as well. And so that's where we see a lot of the business. And then we are very fortunate to partner with some great conferences, things like Institute of Functional Medicine, my all-time favorite A4M. Again, the anti-aging guys have done an amazing job, I think, of cornering that market from an education and conference perspective. And so we've been very fortunate that in many regards, those are screened for us in terms of the types of providers who are looking to go the extra mile and attend these types of meetings where they're looking at, recognizing that the kind of current system is kind of broken. How can they enhance medical care? How can they go the extra yard for their patient? And I think those types of organizations that we work with in terms of the conferences we attend give us this great entree and access to some of these, world-class type providers.
And of course, I'm a member of A4M, and I think they're the granddaddy of the functional medicine conferences. Although I would say, having just come back from RADFest, which was one that I had never really attended or thought of attending until the co-founder was on my podcast and encouraged me. So I would tell you that was actually a very interesting conference. It's much smaller. And focus, more their kind of niche is immortality or living longer, better. But of course, that's what all of us want. Is why we're involved in all these functional medicine conferences. But this one was the exhibitors. I think you would have liked it because they get a chance to talk more directly to the doctors and the consumers that are visiting, because it's a much smaller exhibitor hall than the 1,000 or so that you get at A4M. So you do get a lot more attention. And James Stroll is the person that was on my podcast. He, has been brilliant about bringing in some of the very, very top speakers. They would probably love to have you as a speaker. And if you're ever interested, I'd be happy to connect
Yeah,
you.
no, that was wonderful. I mean, it's always trying to get the message out to kind of interesting groups. So
Well, 10 of at least 10 of my podcast guests were there as speakers. So
wow.
that's a good validation for us, but it's also that they know how to search out some of the very best the way we do. And I think it would be, and actually, I don't think there was anyone doing microbiome like, Krishnan, he's been a guest. He wasn't there, and he's doing a lot of new things, having left Microbiome Labs as the founder. So, but people like that, we're visibly, conspicuously missing. So I think maybe there would be some reason.
That sounds an interesting one for sure. And we're always looking for kind of new avenues, as we continue to grow. But as I say, those conferences and those referrals seem to be, it's a constant source for us at the moment, which is fantastic. And as I say, we're continually looking to grow and come on great podcasts like this one. It's about getting the message out to, those interested consumers and providers, who are looking at making that next leap into, functional medicine and longevity.
Well, and the other thing, I think people need to know, what are the most common food allergies? And let's also, I know in our last podcast we did differentiate and you defined, but let's do it again just in case people didn't see that. The differences of food allergies, or just let's say allergies and intolerances and sensitivity. So those three, I guess, would be the three-legged stool of
exactly. So let me take them on severity, probably. So allergy it's an immunological response, and the pathway is a thing called IgE, which most people have heard of. And generally, with an IgE allergy response, it's instant. So again, it kind of happens immediately. And generally, the symptoms are severe. So things like prophylactic shock. Think bad thing happened. Think kiddo eating peanut. Boom, instant reaction. And so generally with an allergy, it's pretty obvious what you might have just consumed has kind of led to that, that cause and effect type thing. So it's kind of instant. With with the intolerance, what I would say there, it's an inability to process something. So if you think like a lactose intolerance, it's an inability to process, and that's what that's what you're looking at when you talk about an intolerance. When you look at a sensitivity, which is what we're measuring, it's like an allergy. It's both still an immunological reaction, but the big difference is the timing, because what you're seeing is it can be delayed up to 72 hours. So it makes it much harder for a patient to work out what they might have consumed in that 72-hour period is leading to the symptoms they're presenting with. And those symptoms can be many and varied. And we talked about brain health, gut health, skin-related issues, migraines, kind of, all these different symptoms, which again, we like to think of the root cause of all those being inflammation, hence why I think we're seeing the kind of traction that we do, because we're not just looking at exposure, we're looking at which foods cause you an inflammatory response. And so that when you look at those three things, you've got the allergy, IgE, you've got the sensitivity, IgG, and with us, the complement. And it's that delayed nature of that which makes it different. And again, the symptoms are generally much less severe. And thirdly, as I say, you've got the intolerance, which is more, as I say, an inability to process something. And the best example, obviously, for most people is lactose. So again, with a lactose intolerance, it's an inability to process versus an immediate reaction with the IgE or the delayed reaction with the food sensitivity. Does that make some sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that eggs and milk and wheat are the three.
In fact, we're always, that's one of the things we're looking to develop is, can you develop a rapid test to look at the big three of eggs, milk, and wheat? And so again, that's one of the things we're looking at.
Yeah, exactly what I was going to ask you. So you were great minds think alike.
Exactly.
But in addition, and just one side note on that, I recently just had a blood test done with my doctor, just, the normal 1 year physical exam blood test, but she's very, very thorough. So, they took 20 vials of blood.
Oh my gosh.
I know.
Is it a doctor or a vampire you went to?
I didn't think I was going to have any blood left when I walked out of there, but anyway, I guess one of the tests she did was they made a little bit of a mistake. She wanted some food sensitivity test that was in her toolkit, but they took the wrong one. But anyway, included in that one, they said that I had a sensitivity to eggs. But honestly, James, I eat eggs all the time, and I never feel anything, not immediately or even delayed. So what would that mean? That
Well, that's the classical thing that's happened to you, Michelle, is that they gave you an IgG test, which all it tells you is exposure, doesn't tell you about inflammation. So I would confidently predict that that test that your provider ran, a very thorough provider, I'm sure. Obviously, if 20 vials is anything to kind of go by, so the idea would be they've just measured what you're exposed to, and so you quite rightly have identified that you eat a lot of eggs. Eggs came up, and so again, that is the I would argue limitation of the IgG only test, because it's only telling you what you're exposed to. And again, you're a sharp individual, Michelle. You know what you're eating, so it's kind of limited, I would say, use to someone who's aware of what they're consuming. And even if you're not fully aware of what you're consuming, that's not very helpful in terms of from a clinical perspective, because you want to know what's the root cause. What is it you're consuming? Is anything you're consuming leading to the symptoms that you present with when you go either for your annual check, or you're looking for a major reset, whatever that might be, in terms of the health journey that we're all on.
Okay, so another thing I wanted to be sure that I remember last time you helped our viewers to connect with one of your nutrition experts. Is she, the German lady, is she still involved?
Dr. Silke Heiner is still available. So again, if anyone's interested in running the test after this, we'd be delighted to link her up with Dr. Heiner. If you come to the KBMO Diagnostics.com website, so that's www.kbmodiagnostics.com. In fact, if you look at the screen, it's underneath my name there, kbmodiagnostics.com. And if you just go to the send us a message on that website and mention, more importantly, Ageless and Timeless, and we'll put you in contact with Silke, and she'd be delighted to help you get you a test kit. As we mentioned, it can be done at home. So and then more importantly, she's an amazing provider to kind of then go through review those results with you. So again, that would be a very good thing for any one of us to do, is not only take the test, but more importantly have the great honor of working with Silke, who's an amazing European nutritionist and has many years of education, and as well as running the fit test as well.
And then so people can come to you, our viewers can come directly to you, even if they're not coming through a provider. They can do that if they go to her.
Exactly.
She is the provider, but she's within your company.
Exactly.
Okay.
So we can then make sure we can make that happen.
And last time, I think you offered, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but since
I feel like you are going to put me on the spot, but anyway.
I think you're very kind and generous, and that's why I think I can do that. But I think last time you said if they come through the ageless code, that they would get a ageless discount. So is that still available, or should we?
Well, let me check that with Silke before I say it, and then go, oh my gosh.
Okay.
Definitely, potentially. So potentially there is a discount available if you mention Ageless and Timeless. And what I'll do is I'll reach out to Silke and make sure that we can include that.
Okay, and so just so people are not disappointed if it isn't available, the test costs how much for a person?
Again, we'll make sure that Silke kind of provides it. To be honest, I'm not entirely sure what her current pricing is, because again, we don't deal with the kind of end user price. We only deal with the wholesale price to the providers.
Right, to the providers. Got it. Okay, understood. All right. Well, as always, I'm sad when we come to the end of our discussion, and that we couldn't get your test that's up on the screen. So if people want to look at the test, can they go on your website and see the sample?
You can. So again, if you go up onto the website, you'll see it under the gut barrier panel. You'll see the panel that we were talking about. Hopefully it'll be up afterwards. So again, if there's a follow on to this, and hopefully we can have that picture. If not, I can definitely send you one, and then that'll be give you access to kind of seeing the test as well.
So it's been about a year since I did your last time at the A4M. I only did the gut barrier. I didn't do the. 2 years ago we did the whole thing. Is it possible? I mean, is that about the right time every year to do the gut barrier?
Every year, I mean, people do it, but again, if you're not feeling any symptoms, or if those symptoms have cleared up, then that's a great thing. But yeah, I think the gut barrier is a great one to run, because again, you can see what might be going on. In terms of from an immune health standpoint, and again, it's only taken a pandemic for us all to recognize immune health is kind of important. So, but that's a good thing, and so we can look at that and kind of give you a good indication of what might be going on.
Yeah, I like to do the food sensitivities because I think that is the root cause of a lot of what people have then as a result in the gut barrier panel. So like you've just described today, I mean, food is oftentimes the root cause of why you are having issues. So I think doing the whole, I'm just recommending this to our viewers. I think to do the whole thing, the comprehensive test, and then can they get a list of providers from your website to look?
Yeah, they could. Well, if they come into our website, then I'll make sure our sales team are then kind of fanning them out to make sure that they've got providers. But as I say, given again post-pandemic that we're all more familiar with kind of doing these things over Zoom, definitely Silk is a great kind of place to start. Or if they want to kind of visit someone, they can do that as well.
Perfect. Okay, James. Well, the time is gone, and they're flagging me to get off. So I always try to keep it within their time frame because I respect them. So I'm really sorry that it ends, but I think we've covered so much ground today. And even though you've come on for a second time, there was a lot of new things that you shared with us today. So I feel like even if people did see the first one, they've learned a lot from the second one. And of course, nothing ever is static in this world. So, well, thank you so much for being with us.
Well, thank you, Michelle, and everyone who listens to Ageless and Timeless. I think it's an amazing podcast, and again, we're very fortunate that we're a repeat offender, and we're back on.
As a return favor to you for saying such a wonderful thing about us, I'm going to tell you that the other conference I went to was Fab Mancini. It's a small boutique conference that you would absolutely love, and they had some incredible speakers there. Very much like you. So I've got two jobs to do for you. One is to introduce you to Fab, and the other one to introduce you
Rad.
His name is Fab.
You have to get the fit at Rad. Was it Rad and Fab?
Yeah, Rad Fest and Fab Mancini. So and this time was in LA, but they changed the location for the Fab Mancini one. So you will hear from me soon, but I'm going to make my overtures to them for you.
Fantastic. All right, well, much appreciated. Thank you again, Michelle. Much appreciated.
Weekend.
Thanks everyone for listening. Much appreciated.
All right. Bye-bye.
Cheers.